Tom had always considered himself a good neighbor. He kept his lawn neat, his house well maintained, and he even volunteered to help with the neighborhood block parties twice a year. For 5 peaceful years, life in Oakwood Heights had been everything he'd hoped for when he purchased his modest 2-story home. That peace shattered the day Diane Wilcox became president of the Homeowners Association. Diane moved into the neighborhood about 2 years ago, buying the largest house on the street. She drove a shiny black Tesla Model X that she proudly parked in her driveway rather than in her garage, as if it were a trophy on display. Within 6 months of her arrival, she had joined the HOA board. Within a year, she had somehow maneuvered her way to the presidency. Tom first noticed something was wrong when his March electric bill arrived. He lived alone, worked as a nurse with regular night shifts, and was careful about his electricity usage. He turned off lights when not in use, kept his thermostat at a reasonable temperature, and had even invested in energy-efficient appliances. So when his bill came in nearly double what it normally was, he was confused. "This doesn't make any sense," Tom muttered, reviewing the paper bill at his kitchen table. He pulled up his online account to check his daily usage patterns and noticed odd spikes occurring regularly between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., precisely when he was working his night shifts at the hospital. Something wasn't right. After calling the electric company and getting nowhere, they simply confirmed the readings were accurate. Tom decided to investigate on his own. He swapped shifts with a coworker to stay home one night, when the mysterious power usage typically spiked. Around midnight, Tom heard a faint noise outside. He peered through his blinds but saw nothing unusual. Putting on a jacket, he stepped outside to check around his property. The spring air was cool and still. Crickets chirped in the distance, and the neighborhood was quiet except for the occasional passing car. Tom walked the perimeter of his house, flashlight in hand, looking for anything unusual. He almost missed it. Behind the row of thick bushes that separated his property from Diane's, Tom noticed something out of place. Pushing aside the branches, he discovered an extension cord, a heavy-duty, outdoor-rated orange cable, snaking its way from his external power outlet toward Diane's property. "You've got to be kidding me," he whispered, following the cord with his flashlight. The cable had been carefully concealed, partially buried in some places, running behind plants and decorative rocks. It led straight to Diane's garage, where a small gap under the door allowed the cord to slip inside. Tom's heart raced. Was Diane, the HOA president who constantly lectured others about neighborhood standards, stealing his electricity? He needed proof. Tom went back inside and grabbed his phone. He took photos of the extension cord's path, making sure to document where it connected to his outlet and how it ran to Diane's garage. Then, he carefully put everything back as he found it, not wanting to alert Diane that he'd discovered her scheme. The next day, Tom installed a small security camera discreetly aimed at his outdoor outlet. It was the kind that would record when it detected motion and send alerts to his phone. 3 nights later, while working his regular shift, Tom's phone buzzed with an alert. The camera had detected movement. He stepped away from the nurse's station to check the footage and felt his blood pressure rise as he watched. There was Diane, dressed in dark clothing, carefully connecting the extension cord to his outlet. She worked quickly, efficiently, as if she'd done this many times before. After plugging in, she adjusted the cord's position in the bushes, making sure it remained hidden. Over the next 2 weeks, Tom documented every instance. Diane would always come during his night shifts, which she seemed to know the schedule of, to connect her Tesla to his power. The pattern was consistent. She would plug in around midnight and disconnect before dawn. One evening, while reviewing his evidence, Tom's neighbor Ben knocked on his door. "Hey Tom, got a minute?" Ben asked. He was an older man, retired from a career in banking, and one of the few neighbors Tom genuinely liked. "Sure, come on in," Tom said, quickly closing the folder with his evidence. Ben settled into a chair at the kitchen table. "I noticed you've been working different shifts lately. Everything okay at the hospital?" "Just covering for someone," Tom replied, not wanting to reveal his investigation. "How are things with you?" "Oh, you know, the usual HOA drama." Ben rolled his eyes. "Diane's on a power trip again. She's sending violation notices for the smallest things. My bird feeder is apparently now against regulations even though it's been in the same spot for 8 years. Tom nodded sympathetically. She seems to have her own interpretation of the rules. That's putting it mildly. Ben chuckled without humor. Between you and me, something's not right with that woman. Last week, she was wandering around the neighborhood at midnight. Said she was doing a security check when Mrs. Patterson spotted her and asked what she was doing. Tom's ears perked up. Midnight checks, huh? Yep, weird, right? Anyway, just wanted to give you a heads up. She's been taking pictures of your porch. Said your welcome mat doesn't meet HOA standards. After Ben left, Tom felt a renewed sense of anger. Not only was Diane stealing his electricity, but she was also looking for violations at his house, probably to use against him if he ever confronted her about the theft. Tom decided to gather one final piece of evidence. He calculated how much extra electricity Diane was using based on his bills and the Tesla's charging specifications. The amount came to roughly $175 per month, over $2,000 per year if she'd been doing this since becoming HOA president. Unbelievable, Tom muttered as he reviewed his findings. She drives a $100,000 car but steals my electricity to charge it. That night, unable to sleep, Tom sat in his darkened living room, watching through the window as Diane once again snuck onto his property around midnight. As he watched her confidently plug in the extension cord and adjust it to remain hidden, he noticed how practiced her movements were. This wasn't opportunistic, this was calculated theft. Diane, with her perfectly highlighted hair and designer clothes, who constantly reminded everyone about property values and neighborhood standards, was a thief. The same woman who had fined the Johnsons $250 for leaving their garbage bins out one day too long was stealing thousands of dollars worth of electricity as Tom watched her disappear back toward her house. He felt a mixture of anger and determination. He had all the evidence he needed now. The question was, what was he going to do about it? He knew confronting Diane wouldn't be easy. As HOA president, she had significant influence in the neighborhood. She could make his life difficult with fines, violations, and other harassment. And would others even believe him? Diane had carefully cultivated an image of respectability and authority. Tom turned away from the window, his mind racing with possibilities. He wasn't just going to stop the theft. He was going to expose Diane for who she really was. She had picked the wrong neighbor to steal from. Tomorrow, he would begin planning exactly how to give Diane Wilcox a shock she would never forget. Tom spent the next few days carefully planning how to approach Diane about the electricity theft. He organized his evidence, photos, videos, and utility bills into a neat folder. As a nurse, he was used to difficult conversations, but this was different. This was deliberate theft by someone with power over him. On Saturday morning, Tom spotted Diane in her front yard, inspecting her perfectly manicured rose bushes. She wore expensive gardening gloves and a wide-brimmed hat that probably cost more than Tom's entire gardening budget for the year. Now or never, Tom muttered to himself as he walked across the street, folder in hand. "Good morning, Diane," he said, trying to keep his voice casual despite the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. Diane looked up, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Tom, your azaleas need pruning. The ragged appearance brings down the neighborhood aesthetic." Tom ignored the comment. "I need to talk to you about something important. Do you have a minute?" She sighed dramatically, pulling off her gardening gloves. "I suppose. Though I'm very busy today. The HOA has many pressing matters." "This won't take long," Tom said. "I've noticed something strange with my electricity bill recently. It's been unusually high, especially during times when I'm not home." Diane's expression didn't change, but Tom noticed her posture stiffen slightly. "And what does this have to do with me?" Tom opened his folder. "I installed a security camera. I have footage of you connecting an extension cord from my outdoor outlet to your garage. Multiple nights over the past month." He showed her a clear image on his phone. Diane, clearly recognizable, plugging the orange extension cord into his outlet. For a moment, Diane said nothing. Then she laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh, but one of genuine amusement, which caught Tom off guard. "Oh, that. Yes, I've been borrowing a little electricity. My home charging station has been malfunctioning, and Tesla said it would be weeks before a technician could come fix it." She waved her hand dismissively. "It's just a tiny bit of power. Hardly worth mentioning." Tom stared at her in disbelief. "You've been stealing my electricity for months." That tiny bit of power has cost me over $175 extra each month. Don't be dramatic, Diane said, rolling her eyes. It can't possibly be that much. And besides, as HOA president, I have emergency access rights to community resources when necessary. My private electricity isn't a community resource, Tom said, feeling his temper rising. What you're doing is theft, plain and simple. I want you to stop immediately and pay me back for what you've taken. Diane's friendly demeanor vanished instantly. Her eyes narrowed and her mouth formed a thin, hard line. Listen carefully, Tom, she said, her voice low and threatening. I don't think you understand how things work here. As HOA president, I have certain flexibilities. For instance, I could suddenly notice numerous violations on your property. Violations? Like what? Tom asked. Well, let's see. Diane pretended to think. Your mailbox is non-regulation height. Your garbage bins are visible from the street on non-collection days. That shade of blue you painted your back fence wasn't properly approved. Each violation carries a $100 fine, which doubles every 30 days it remains uncorrected. Tom felt a chill despite the warm spring air. That's blackmail. Diane smiled coldly. That's community management. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual important matters to attend to. She turned her back on him and resumed pruning her roses as if he wasn't there. Tom walked back to his house, hands shaking with anger. He hadn't expected Diane to admit her actions so easily or to threaten him so blatantly. He needed help. Later that afternoon, Tom knocked on his neighbor Ben's door, hoping to gain an ally. She said, "What?" Ben asked after Tom explained the situation. They sat on Ben's porch drinking iced tea. She basically admitted to stealing my electricity and then threatened me with HOA violations if I pursued it, Tom said. Ben shook his head. I'd like to say I'm surprised, but I'm not. Diane has the board wrapped around her finger. Last month, Lou from down the street complained about an unfair violation, and suddenly his request to build a deck was denied for environmental concerns. So what can I do? Tom asked. Honestly? Not much through official channels. The HOA bylaws give the president a lot of power, and Diane knows every loophole. Ben took a long sip of his tea. Have you tried talking to other neighbors? Over the next few days, Tom discreetly spoke with several other neighbors. The responses were all similar. Sympathetic nods, concerned looks, but ultimately the same answer. I can't afford to get on Diane's bad side. One neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Patty, was more direct. Last year, I questioned her about HOA fee increases at a meeting. The next day, I had violation notices for my bird bath, my wind chimes, and the color of my garden hose. It's not worth the fight, dear. Desperate, Tom filed a formal complaint with the HOA board. He included all his evidence, the photos, videos, and calculations of stolen electricity. 3 days later, he received a response. After careful review, the board finds insufficient evidence of misconduct. Matter closed. The letter was signed by Diane herself. That night, Tom watched through his window as Diane once again connected her extension cord to his outlet. Even more boldly than before, she even looked directly at his window and smiled before walking back to her house. The next morning, Tom woke to find 3 violation notices taped to his front door, one for his mailbox height, one for unapproved landscape features, the small vegetable garden in his backyard, and one for excessive noise disturbance, his neighbor's dog that had barked while Diane was placing the notices. Total fines, $350, due within 14 days. At work that evening, Tom could barely focus on his patients. His mind kept drifting to Diane and her smug confidence that she could get away with stealing from him while punishing him for non-existent violations. You seem distracted tonight, commented Lisa, a fellow nurse and friend. Everything okay? Tom hesitated, then shared a simplified version of his HOA troubles. Lisa shook her head. Chodis can be nightmares. My cousin fought with hers for years over a basketball hoop in his driveway. You know what finally worked? He went public, posted the whole story online, sent it to local news. The HOA backed down when they realized how bad they looked. Tom considered this. Going public might work, but it could also backfire spectacularly if Diane twisted the narrative. When his shift ended the next morning, Tom drove home slowly, turning over possible solutions in his mind. As he pulled into his driveway, he noticed something new. Diane had placed small flags around his property. each one marking a supposed violation. His phone pinged with an email from the HOA, 6 new violations, totaling $750 in fines. Inside his house, Tom threw his keys onto the kitchen counter in frustration. He'd tried reasoning with Diane. He'd tried going through proper channels. He'd tried getting support from neighbors. Nothing had worked. Diane wasn't just stealing his electricity anymore. She was actively trying to punish him for standing up to her. And she was doing it all with the protection of HOA rules she manipulated to her advantage. Tom sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by violation notices, and made a decision. Direct confrontation hadn't worked. Official complaints hadn't worked. It was time for a different approach. If Diane wanted to play dirty, he would have to outsmart her. He wouldn't stoop to her level. He'd rise above it with a plan so clever she wouldn't know what hit her until it was too late. Tom smiled for the first time in days as the beginnings of a plan formed in his mind. Diane thought she had all the power, but she had overlooked something important. Tom had nothing left to lose, and he was more resourceful than she realized. "Let's see how you handle a real shock, Diane," he whispered to himself as he began to sketch out his plan. The following morning, Tom woke up with a new sense of purpose. If he was going to beat Diane at her own game, he needed to be thorough and methodical. As a nurse, he was used to keeping detailed records and following procedures. Now he would apply those same skills to build an airtight case against the HOA president. Tom started by creating a dedicated notebook just for this situation. On the first page, he wrote Operation Power Play and smiled at his small joke. Beneath it, he listed everything he knew so far and what he still needed to find out. His first task was to document the physical evidence better. Tom bought a higher quality security camera and installed it with a better view of his outdoor outlet. He also purchased a small, specialized electricity usage monitor that would record exactly how much power was being drawn through that outlet and when. "Let's see her deny the numbers when I have exact readings," Tom muttered as he set up the device. Next, he needed to understand the legal aspects of electricity theft. Tom spent his afternoon off at the local library, researching laws about utility theft. What he discovered surprised him. In their state, electricity theft could be classified as a misdemeanor or even a felony depending on the amount stolen and whether it was an ongoing offense. Over $1,000 in a year makes it a felony, Tom whispered, jotting down notes. "And I'm already at around $2,100 based on my calculations." That evening, Tom called the electric company again, this time armed with specific questions about documenting theft. The customer service representative was more helpful when Tom mentioned potential theft. "We can install a separate meter on that circuit if you suspect unauthorized usage," the rep offered. "There would be a small fee, but it would give you official documentation from the company." "Yes, please," Tom said immediately. "The sooner the better." The electric company scheduled the installation for the following Tuesday. In the meantime, Tom decided to dig deeper into Diane's activities as HOA president. He started by reviewing all the HOA newsletters and meeting minutes from the past 2 years. Since shortly before Diane had joined the board, the transformation was striking. The tone of communications had changed from friendly and community-oriented to strict and threatening. The number of fines issued had tripled. The HOA fees had increased by 15% with vague explanations about community improvements that no one could actually point to. Tom created a timeline, noting patterns and changes that corresponded with Diane's rise to power. He also started reaching out to neighbors again, but with a different approach. Rather than directly asking for help against Diane, he simply asked about their experiences with the HOA over the past few years. The stories poured in. Once people realized Tom wasn't going to report back to Diane. "She threatened to put a lien on my house because my Christmas lights were up 3 days past the January 7th removal deadline," one elderly neighbor confided. "I was in the hospital with pneumonia, for goodness sake." Another neighbor, a single dad with 2 young kids, revealed that Diane had personally blocked his request to install a small playground set in his backyard, citing noise concerns, but had approved a similar structure for her friend 3 houses down. Tom documented every story, building a clear picture of abusive power. But the most interesting information came from an unexpected source: Dave. who had served as HOA treasurer until 6 months ago. "I quit because things didn't add up," Dave told Tom over coffee at a local shop far from their neighborhood. Diane insisted on handling certain vendor payments herself, outside the normal approval process. When I questioned it, she said it was for emergency services that needed immediate payment. "Did you ever find out what these services were?" Tom asked. Dave shook his head. "Not exactly, but the timing was strange. These emergency payments always seemed to happen right after her Tesla got serviced, or after she went on one of her weekend trips. Nothing I could prove, but it felt off." Tom added this information to his growing file. If Diane was misusing HOA funds on top of stealing electricity, this was bigger than he had initially thought. On Tuesday, the electric company installed the separate meter on Tom's outdoor circuit. The technician explained how to read it and gave him a form to record the readings daily. "If you see usage when you're not home, that's your proof right there," the technician said. And it's official company equipment, so the readings would stand up in court if needed. That night, while Tom was at work, both his security camera and the new meter recorded Diane connecting her Tesla to his power. The footage was clearer than ever, showing her face perfectly as she plugged in the extension cord. The meter showed a steady power draw of 7.2 kilowatts for just over 4 hours, exactly matching the charging requirements of her specific Tesla model. Over the next week, Tom documented 3 more instances of power theft. Diane had grown even bolder, now charging her car 3 times weekly at Tom's expense. Each time he carefully recorded the meter readings, saved the security footage, and calculated the cost. But Tom didn't stop there. He started following Diane's movements more carefully, noting when she left for her supposed HOA emergency meetings, which often coincided with spa appointments in the next town over, based on the branded shopping bag she returned with. Using his knowledge of her schedule, Tom took photos of the extension cord's path when she wasn't home, getting clear documentation of how it ran from his property to hers. He even managed to get a picture of where it connected to a charging adapter inside her garage when she left the door partially open one afternoon. While building his case against Diane, Tom also looked into the HOA bylaws and regulations. He discovered something interesting. There was a recall procedure for board members, including the president if enough homeowners signed a petition citing specific misconduct. That could be useful, Tom muttered as he added this information to his notes. 2 weeks into his investigation, Tom had amassed an impressive amount of evidence: daily meter readings showing unauthorized power usage, security footage of Diane connecting to his power multiple times, calculations of the total electricity stolen, now exceeding 2,300, testimonials from neighbors about Diane's abuse of power, questionable HOA financial transactions that Dave had pointed out, a complete timeline of HOA changes since Diane took over. What Tom still needed was a way to present all this evidence so that Diane couldn't twist it or dismiss it. He needed to expose her in a way that would leave no doubt about her actions. The opportunity came in an unexpected form: an email announcing the quarterly HOA meeting, which would be held at Diane's house the following week. The email emphasized that attendance was strongly encouraged and that violation notices would be discussed. Tom stared at the email, a plan forming in his mind. The quarterly meeting would have most homeowners present. It would be the perfect time to reveal everything he had discovered. But simply standing up and accusing the HOA president wouldn't be enough. Diane was too skilled at manipulating situations. Tom needed something more compelling, more undeniable. He looked at his wall of evidence, then at his laptop where he'd been researching small, wireless projectors that could connect to a phone. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, Tom said to himself, then live video must be worth 1,000,000. Tom smiled as the final pieces of his plan fell into place. Diane thought she had all the power, but the quarterly meeting was just a week away, and he would be more than ready. As he closed his investigation notebook for the evening, Tom felt a sense of calm determination. Diane had picked the wrong neighbor to mess with, and it was almost time to give her the shock she'd never forget. With just a week until the HOA meeting, Tom knew he needed to perfect his plan. Simply presenting evidence wouldn't be enough. He needed to catch Diane in the act in a way that couldn't be denied or explained away. First, he purchased a small, powerful projector that could connect wirelessly to his phone. He tested it at home, making sure it could display his security camera footage clearly on a wall. This should work perfectly, he muttered as he adjusted the settings. Next, Tom reached out to a few neighbors he trusted, Ben, Patty, and Dave from his earlier conversations. He invited them over for coffee one evening when he knew Diane would be at her weekly spa appointment. "I need your help," Tom said once everyone was seated in his living room. He laid out the evidence he'd gathered about Diane's electricity theft and her abuse of power as HOA president. "I'm not surprised," Patty said, shaking her head. "That woman has been terrorizing this neighborhood for too long. The question is, what can we actually do about it?" Ben asked. "She's got the board in her pocket," Tom smiled. "That's where my plan comes in. The quarterly meeting is at Diane's house this Friday night. I want to expose her in front of everyone, but I need your help to pull it off." He explained his idea. Tom would attend the meeting like everyone else, but he would bring his projector hidden in a laptop bag. Dave, who had previously worked with the HOA treasurer, would ask specific questions about the budget that would keep Diane distracted. Meanwhile, Ben would help Tom set up the projector discreetly, pointing it at an empty wall in Diane's living room where the meeting would be held. "What about me?" Patty asked. "I need you to record everything on your phone once it starts," Tom said. "We'll want a record of her reaction." The group spent the next hour refining the plan and assigning specific tasks. By the time they left, everyone knew exactly what they needed to do. The next day, Tom made an anonymous call to the local police department's non-emergency line. He didn't file a formal report, but mentioned that there might be evidence of ongoing electricity theft in the neighborhood. He wanted to establish a record in case things escalated. He also contacted a local news reporter who had recently done a series on HOA disputes. "I might have an interesting story for you next week," Tom told her. "It involves HOA corruption, utility theft, and a Tesla." The reporter sounded intrigued. "If you get solid evidence, I'd definitely be interested in hearing more." With outside interest alerted, Tom focused on the technical aspects of his plan. He installed a smart power control system on his outdoor circuit, one that would let him monitor and control the outlet remotely from his phone. "This is the final piece," Tom said as he tested the system. He could now cut power to the outlet with a simple tap on his phone screen. He could also set it to redirect power usage to his security, cameras, and recording equipment whenever the outlet was accessed. Tom also prepared a detailed presentation on his laptop, a slideshow of evidence that he could quickly display through the projector if needed. He included photos of the extension cord, video clips of Diane connecting it, meter readings showing power usage while he was away, and a detailed calculation of the total electricity stolen. The night before the meeting, Tom did one final review of everything. His equipment was charged and ready. His evidence was organized. His allies were prepared. There was just one more thing to do. Tom sent a text message to his friends who were helping him. "Remember, we need to let her fully incriminate herself before we act." On Friday evening, Tom arrived at Diane's house 15 minutes early for the HOA meeting. He carried his laptop bag with the projector hidden inside, along with a folder of papers to make it look like he was just bringing HOA-related documents. Diane greeted him at the door with a look of surprise. "You're early," she said, clearly not happy to see him. "I thought I'd help set up," Tom replied with a polite smile. "Big meeting tonight, right?" Diane's eyes narrowed slightly. "Everything's already set up. Just find a seat." Tom walked into her immaculate living room where rows of chairs had been arranged facing a small podium. He chose a seat near the back, close to a power outlet and with a clear view of a large, empty wall to his right. Other neighbors began to arrive. Ben nodded discreetly at Tom as he entered. Patty came in with her phone already in hand, pretending to check emails. Dave arrived last, carrying a thick folder labeled HOA Financial Questions. As people settled in, Tom noticed something interesting. Diane's Tesla was visible through the living room window, parked in her driveway rather than in her garage. "Perfect," Tom whispered. This likely meant she was planning to charge it again tonight using his electricity, probably thinking he would be occupied at the meeting for at least 2 hours. At exactly 7 p.m., Diane called the meeting to order. She stood at the podium, wearing an expensive-looking blazer and a confident smile. "Welcome, everyone, to our quarterly HOA meeting. We have a full agenda tonight, including discussion of several neighborhood violations that need immediate attention. Tom watched as she began going through her presentation, occasionally glancing meaningfully in his direction when mentioning problem properties. He remained calm, waiting for the right moment. About 30 minutes into the meeting, during Diane's long-winded explanation of new landscaping requirements, Tom felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. He discreetly checked it, an alert from his security system showing movement near his outdoor outlet. Tom opened the app and saw live footage of Diane's garage door opening remotely. No one was visible, but the system was smart enough to detect the extension cord being pulled from its hiding place by an automatic retractor Diane had installed. "She's doing it right now," Tom texted to his allies. Automated system. While Diane continued talking about acceptable shades of exterior paint colors, Tom watched on his phone as the extension cord snaked its way to his outlet and connected itself. His power meter immediately registered the beginning of a charging cycle. Unbelievable, Tom thought. She's stealing my electricity while giving a presentation about property values and neighborhood standards. Diane was now taking questions from homeowners. As planned, Dave raised his hand. "I have some concerns about the financial report," Dave said, opening his folder, "specifically about these emergency maintenance expenses that weren't itemized." As Diane launched into a defensive explanation, Ben quietly moved to sit next to Tom. "Ready?" Ben whispered. Tom nodded and slipped the mini projector from his bag. While everyone's attention was on Dave's questioning, Ben helped Tom position the projector toward the empty wall. They connected it to Tom's phone wirelessly and tested that it was working by briefly projecting a small dot of light, then turning it off again. "All set," Ben confirmed. Patty caught Tom's eye from across the room and held up her phone slightly, indicating she was ready to record. Tom sent one more text to his friends. "Wait for my signal." Diane was becoming visibly frustrated with Dave's detailed financial questions. "These expenses were necessary and approved by me as president," she said sharply. "We don't need to waste everyone's time with line-by-line explanations." "Actually," Dave responded calmly, "the bylaws state that all expenses over $500 require itemized reporting to homeowners." Diane's face flushed slightly. "Let's move on to new business. We need to discuss the increasing problem of neighbors violating HOA regulations." She clicked to a new slide in her presentation, which showed a photo of Tom's house with red circles highlighting supposed violations. "Some residents seem to think they don't need to follow the same rules as everyone else," Diane said, staring directly at Tom. "This creates an unfair burden on those of us who maintain proper standards." Tom felt a surge of anger but remained calm. This was actually perfect timing. Just then, Tom's phone vibrated again. He checked it and saw a notification from the Tesla app. Not his, but Diane's, which was displayed on her smart TV screen that had been mirroring her laptop for the presentation, but was now showing her phone notifications. The notification read, "Tesla charging, 32 miles added. It was time." Tom pressed a button on his phone and the projector came to life. Suddenly, the wall beside Diane's presentation was filled with live footage from Tom's security camera, showing the extension cord running from his house to Diane's garage, alongside a real-time power meter display showing electricity being drawn for a Tesla charger. A gasp went through the room as everyone's attention turned to the unexpected projection. "What is this?" Diane demanded, turning to see what everyone was looking at. Tom stood up. "That, Diane, is live footage of you stealing electricity from my house to charge your Tesla, right now, while you're conducting this meeting about neighborhood standards." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Tom's plan had worked perfectly. Now it was time for the final revelation. For a moment, the room was completely silent. Everyone stared at the wall where Tom's projection clearly showed the extension cord running from his outdoor outlet to Diane's garage, along with the power meter rapidly counting up the electricity being used. Diane recovered quickly, her shocked expression transforming into an icy glare. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, trying to regain control. "Turn that off immediately. You're disrupting an official HOA meeting." Tom stood his ground. "I don't think so, Diane. Everyone deserves to see what's really going on." He tapped his phone again and the projection changed to show a split screen. On one side, the live feed of the extension cord. On the other, a calendar showing every date and time Diane had stolen electricity over the past month. with exact kilowatt-hour amounts and dollar values. For those who don't know what you're looking at, Tom explained to the room, Diane has been connecting an extension cord from my outdoor outlet to her garage to charge her Tesla. She's been doing this for months, always when I'm working night shifts at the hospital. The neighbors murmured in disbelief. One woman in the front row, a retired judge that everyone respected, leaned forward with narrowed eyes. "Is this accurate, Diane?" she asked. "Have you been taking electricity from Tom's house?" Diane's face flushed red. "It's not stealing. As HOA president, I sometimes need to utilize community resources for the benefit of the neighborhood. My Tesla allows me to quickly respond to HOA emergencies." "Your personal electricity isn't a community resource," Tom said, echoing their earlier private conversation. "And your Tesla isn't HOA property. You've stolen over $2,300 worth of electricity from me." More gasps filled the room. "That's theft," someone called out. "She's been charging her luxury car on Tom's dime," another added. Diane banged her gavel loudly. "Order! I will have order in this meeting." But she had lost control of the room. Neighbors were turning to each other, whispering and pointing at the projection. Tom wasn't finished. "There's more," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. He changed the projection again, this time showing a spreadsheet of HOA finances with certain entries highlighted. These are the so-called emergency maintenance expenses that Dave was asking about earlier. Notice how they align perfectly with dates Diane took her weekend trips to the beach and when her Tesla received servicing. Dave stood up, holding his own copy of the financial records. "As former treasurer, I can confirm these expenses were never properly documented. When I asked for receipts, I was removed from my position." Diane looked from Tom to Dave, her composure cracking. This is slander. I'll sue both of you." "Truth is an absolute defense against slander," the retired judge commented dryly from the front row. Patty had been recording everything on her phone as planned. Now she spoke up. "I've had enough of this bullying, Diane. You fined me $500 for having my grandson's bicycle visible in my front yard for one afternoon. Meanwhile, you've been stealing thousands of dollars from Tom and possibly misusing HOA funds." Other neighbors began sharing their stories. Excessive fines for minor infractions, denied improvement requests without explanation, special exceptions made for Diane's friends. Tom let them talk, watching as years of pent-up frustration poured out. Diane stood frozen behind her podium, her face cycling between rage, shock, and fear as her carefully constructed power structure crumbled around her. When the room quieted slightly, Tom spoke again. "I've contacted the police about the electricity theft. I've also spoken with a reporter from Channel 5 News who's very interested in doing a story about HOA corruption." Diane finally found her voice. "You wouldn't dare. Think about property values. A scandal like this would hurt everyone." "Actually," Ben chimed in, "studies show that removing corrupt HOA leadership typically increases property values by creating a more desirable living environment." A man in the back of the room raised his hand. Tom recognized him as Frank, a quiet neighbor who rarely spoke at meetings. "For what it's worth, I'm a police officer. What you've done, Diane, is definitely theft of utilities. In our jurisdiction, that's a Class B misdemeanor at minimum. Given the amount, it could potentially be a felony charge." Another woman stood up, Helen, who worked at a law firm. "And as a paralegal, I can tell you that the HOA itself could be held liable if funds were misappropriated. We should conduct a full audit immediately." Diane's face had gone pale. She looked around the room, searching for allies, but found none. Even the board members who typically supported her were avoiding eye contact. "I think," Tom said calmly, "that we should refer to Section 8 of the HOA bylaws, which covers the removal of board members for misconduct." Dave pulled out a copy of the bylaws. A petition signed by 2/3 of homeowners can remove any board member, including the president. "Given what we've seen tonight, I move to circulate such a petition immediately." "I'll second that motion," called out the retired judge. "All in favor?" Dave asked. A chorus of "aye" filled the room. Nearly every hand went up. Tom switched the projection one last time, showing a blank petition he had already prepared with spaces for signatures. "I brought copies," he said, "and pens." As neighbors lined up to sign, Diane finally seemed to realize the severity of her situation. Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time since Tom had known her, she looked small, "This isn't fair," she said, but there was no fight left in her voice. "Neither was stealing my electricity or abusing your position," Tom replied quietly. "Actions have consequences, Diane." Within 15 minutes, the petition had enough signatures to remove Diane from the board. Dave, as former treasurer, was nominated as interim president until a proper election could be held. The meeting moved to Dave's house down the street to continue official business, including scheduling an audit of HOA finances and reviewing all recent violation notices. Diane was left alone in her living room, the evidence of her misconduct still projected on her wall. As neighbors filed out, many stopped to thank Tom for standing up to Diane. Patty gave him a hug. Ben clapped him on the shoulder. "You did good, Tom," Frank, the police officer, said as he left. "I'll need to take an official statement from you tomorrow about the electricity theft. Just protocol." "Of course," Tom agreed. The next morning, Tom woke up to several text messages from neighbors. The news had spread quickly throughout the neighborhood. Diane's Tesla was gone from her driveway, and a for sale sign had appeared overnight in front of her house. Tom checked his security camera footage from the night before. After everyone had left, Diane had disconnected the extension cord and returned to her garage. She hadn't looked at his camera, but her defeated posture told the whole story. A week later, the local newspaper ran a small article about HOA reform in Oakwood Heights. It mentioned that a resident had exposed electricity theft and potential financial misconduct, leading to new leadership and more transparent policies. The HOA audit revealed that Diane had indeed misused nearly $4,000 in funds for personal expenses. She agreed to repay the full amount to avoid further legal action. She also paid Tom back for all the stolen electricity plus interest. 2 weeks after the meeting, Dave called Tom with news. "Diane's house just sold. She's moving out this weekend," he said. "And the audit committee found something interesting. That regulation about mailbox height that she kept citing. It doesn't actually exist in our bylaws. She made it up." Tom laughed. "Why am I not surprised?" As new HOA president, Dave's first official act was to declare amnesty for all outstanding violation notices issued during Diane's tenure. His second was to propose new bylaws requiring financial transparency and limiting the president's power to issue fines without board approval. The following Saturday, neighbors gathered for an impromptu block party, the first in years. As Tom helped set up folding tables on the community lawn, he caught sight of a moving truck pulling away from Diane's former house. Patty appeared at his side with 2 glasses of lemonade, handing one to Tom. "Here's to the man who gave our neighborhood back to us," she said, raising her glass. Tom shook his head, smiling. "I just did what anyone would do when faced with injustice." "No," Patty said firmly. "Most people would have given up. You didn't." As Tom looked around at his neighbors laughing and chatting freely without fear of arbitrary fines or petty rules, he felt a sense of pride. Sometimes standing up to a bully was about more than just defending yourself. It was about protecting an entire community. And in this case, it had also been about giving a certain power-hungry HOA president a shock she would never forget.